Welcome back. I'd love to read on from where I left off. This was What Are You Doing With Your Life by J. Krishnamurti. And we were discussing how realizing the fact that we are feeling very insecure is going to be a very profound realization that leads us to the fact that we do not require any security. And once we don't require security, it can lead us to an extraordinarily simple, clear, harmonious living. Now, when I picked up the book today, the next thought that really popped up in front of me and is very universal again, because it's going to connect you, me, everyone on this planet. The question he asks is, why are we seeking something? Now please, listen carefully. It's not about what we are seeking. It is why we are seeking something. And Jay goes on to write, we are endlessly seeking, and we never ask why we are seeking. The obvious answer is that we are dissatisfied, unhappy, unfortunate, lonely, unloved, fearful. You and I, we can keep playing this victim card all our lives. Then he says we need something to cling to. We need somebody to protect us, the father, the mother, and so on. And so we are seeking. When we are seeking, we're always finding. Unfortunately, we will always find when we are seeking. And I think why Jay calls it unfortunate is because this satiation of seeking is what is propelling us to go on and look for more. The next relationship, the next experience, the next bond with someone else, and the next emptiness filling binge, which could be from a Netflix series to a drink, to an addiction, to a relationship. And sometimes these self-sabotaging patterns can keep repeating all our lives. And that is why Jay says, unfortunately, we always find when we are seeking. So the first thing is not to seek. And he says, you understand? You all have been told that you must seek, experiment with truth, find out truth, go after it, pursue it, chase it, and that you must discipline, control yourself. And then somebody comes along and says, don't do all that, don't seek all that. Please don't seek at all. Naturally, your reaction is either to ask him to go away, or you turn your back, or you find out for yourself why you say such a thing, not accept, not deny, but question. And what are you seeking? That question keeps resonating. I think Jay keeps on drilling in through a very self-inquiry probing question, because all the time this society likes to discipline us in a particular format to certain sets of do's and don'ts, and this extrinsic discipline has got nothing to do with our intrinsic, self-regulated, universe-defined discipline where everything moves in sync, in harmony with all of creation. Unfortunately, this forced and enforced discipline is trying to control us, our thought, our imagination, our creativity, because the moment we run amok and wild and free without imagination, it's a big threat for organized society, organized religion. For every aspect, we become an immediate, imminent threat. So, what do? Shouldn't we experiment with truth? Shouldn't we find out truth? And Jay says, why do you have to seek? Because you got to inquire about yourself. You're seeking. You're saying that you're missing something in your life inwardly. That's why you're seeking. So that inner void, that sense of incompleteness that has been drilled into us from childhood, we were told how imperfect, how imbalanced, how fat, short, stuttering, poor handwriting. Thousands of errors were pointed out and were drilled into us. Fear of the darkness, fear of crossing the road, fear of doing so many things, fear of venturing out into the world, fear of wearing certain clothes, saying certain things, And all these fears were deeply ingrained and instilled while we were still children and very, very impressionable, programmable wet clay, where the designs that were set into us would stay forever. And that's why we are seeking. Jay says you're seeking, you're saying that you're missing something in this life inwardly, not the level of technique or having a petty job or more money. What is it that we are seeking? We're seeking because in us there is such deep dissatisfaction with our family, with society, with culture, with our own selves, and we want to satisfy, to go beyond this gnawing discontent that is destroying. Now, imagine an imperfect human being who's been trained to know that they are incomplete and imperfect is trying to teach you. And they're going to pass on and genetically code you with the same imperfection and the same set of rules that they have been handed down. It's not their fault. It's conditioning being passed forward. And this imperfect conditioning being passed forward from one person to another is resulting in all of us looking at each other, criticizing, pointing out problems, faults, and limitations and incompletenesses are just combining together, and yet we do not see the pure, complete whole within us. And that is why the dissatisfaction with our family, society, and culture and ourselves grows. We continuously see everything, as Jay says, gnawing discontent is what we see. It is destroying. And why are we discontented? I know discontent can very easily be satisfied. Give a young man who has been discontented, a communist or revolutionary, a good job, and he forgets all about it. I mean, it's so easy to immerse in something. Immerse in a nice job, a car, a nice garden, a good position, and your discontent will disappear, says Jay. If he can achieve an ideological success, that discontent disappears too. But you never ask why you are discontented. Not the people who have jobs and who want better jobs. We must understand the root cause of discontent before we can examine the whole structure and the meaning of pleasure and therefore of sorrow. So I think I'm going to cut down this podcast episode and this video that I create to something very simple, that there is a core underlying discontent, a discomfort, a kind of emptiness that we want to escape all the time by filling it in with objects, experiences, other people. And at times two people marry, they come together and they think that I'm going to complete you, you're going to complete me. And that is the most disastrous coming together of two people, because if two complete people come together, it's a harmonious blend, it's a beautiful communion. Whereas if two incomplete people come and they depend on each other for completing one another, it's a fallacy. And unfortunately, our media, television, films, the whole idea of romance is centered around you complete me, which is completely false. Until unless we understand that the discontent is arising within, like Jay says, and if that discontent, that inquiry leads us to know how complete, how perfect we are, it's going to solve most of the problems, because the disturbance arises within and then it travels far and wide. The disturbance is caused by discontent, and that is what Jay has been discussing in this particular chapter. In fact, I would love to go on to the next chapter, which is Thought, the Thinker, and the Prison of the Self. But how about doing that some other time? Right now, I want to leave you with all these beautiful questions that he's asked. And if I quickly were to review this particular chapter, he's asking about security, happiness, and pleasure. And you got to know what your relationships with security, happiness, and pleasure are. And then he tells us happiness cannot be pursued. Yes, it cannot be. You are the generator, the dynamo of happiness, creating joy within yourself, and it does not depend upon experiences. It depends upon how you relate with those experiences. Then Jay talks about pleasure, enjoyment, and turning it all into dependency and a fear of loss. We don't want the experience to end. We don't want the holiday to end. We don't want the charm and joy of a new car to finish. We don't want the tastes and the flavors of this meal to go away. We don't want a particular lovely relationship to just go on endlessly. But a honeymoon remains a honeymoon, doesn't it? So Jay is talking about the fear of loss all this desiring generates. There's nothing wrong with the desiring. It is the connection and the fallacy that we think desire can fulfill a hole within us. And then Jay continues to talk about joy, which is actually once you're so immersed in a beautiful connection with the universe around you that me dissolves. The little me, the little self, the little ego dissolves into the larger self, into the divine power, into the eternal presence and the amazing movement of life itself. And then there is that constant desire for security which Jay is discussing, and realizing that resentful, more possessive of things that we want, and the more material things we want to possess and hold, the joy completely disappears. So there is a beautiful interrelationship between understanding that the true underlying message of this chapter is we gotta learn to let go. We gotta seek a beautiful freedom of realization that there is abundance in this universe and there is no need to feel insecure. Love is fleeting until unless you generate it. Otherwise, it's going to be all conditional love, dependent on how your connections are established with another person. Unconditional love is forever present, and that is actually the only force in this universe. And I was reading another beautiful book where Anne Lamott has dedicated so many beautiful things to love. And when she goes on to describe love in that first chapter, it was such a delicious read yesterday. I would love to come back and share that with you sometime. But right now, Jay says, please ask, what are you seeking? What is this emptiness all about? And when you go back into a silence and dwell on this question, and you truly find out what are the things that you seek, and are they actually material things that you seek? And then you realize that how ephemeral, short, and how transient is the satisfaction that these things bring you. You'd come to realize that there is something much deeper inside you. That longing which poets and writers have talked about, where people like Khalil Gibran have talked about, where all the Sufi saints have talked about, where Rumis discuss this. Those open wounds inside of us are very different. They are not so superficial. They go so deep to our soul that we need to find what creates these voids in us. And that's why I'm going to read the next chapter with a pause and come back to it, because that is all about thought, the thinker, and the prison of the self. And this is the prison where we've already entered by finally realizing what are our core needs. And we have at least found out that there is something more lurking behind the curtain, the veil of amnesia, the veil of forgetting that we are all divine. But now to come into a human existence and to be a part of this life means we've chosen to experience separation in some form. And that separation is a very interesting learning experience. And that is what is actually the most amusing pursuit in this life. So I think, and let's come back and read the next chapter. Till then, be good to yourselves and keep thinking about who am I, what satisfies me, and the core questions that Jay has been pointing out at the end of this chapter. And that is, what are you seeking? And that is why it's important to ask the very, very basic question which Jay has put in this book as the title of this book. What are you doing with your life? Happy contemplating.